Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are the architects of the information shortcut, the team that takes just a huge stack of research, could be a technical manual, a philosophical treaty, or in today's very unique case, a daily instructional script, and we pull out the most potent, game-changing nuggets of knowledge for you, the learner.
Exactly. And our mission today is, well, it's a masterclass, not so much in what to learn, but really in how to learn consistently, effectively. We are diving into a really fascinating set of source material.
I'm excited about this one.
Me too. It's a script designed for daily use, guiding a learner through English mastery practice. But I mean, the language itself it's almost just the surface.
Absolutely. The title of this rhythm is Daily Rhythms of English Mastery. And it's not just a list of things to do. It details a complete process, a full 24-hour cycle of engagement, from the moment you wake up to that final reflection before you go to sleep. We aren't analyzing the vocabulary list here.
No.
We are analyzing the infrastructure, the psychological and structural routine that's designed to ensure you make consistent progress and, importantly, prevent burnout.
This is a blueprint for resilience. I mean, if you, the listener, are struggling with just the sheer volume of material in any new field, I don't care if it's language, coding, mastering a complex financial model, or, tackling a technical certification, this script holds the underlying mechanism for sustained progress.
This secret sauce.
It is. We are looking for the shortcuts to competence that aren't about cheating the system. It's about optimizing the human brain within the system.
And our mission today is precisely tailored for you. To really understand how this highly structured, step-by-step process creates a shortcut to sustained learning. How does the routine itself become the ultimate engine for knowledge acquisition rather than just the content you're consuming?
That is the core question, isn't it? What's so fascinating here, I think, is how the source material deliberately links your physical presence, your physiological readiness, the routine with the cognitive preparation you need for learning.
Okay, say more about that.
It recognizes a fundamental truth. You just cannot expect deep, focused work if you haven't first anchored your body and, calmed your mind. It's a lesson in engineering your own state for success.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We are analyzing the philosophy of step-by-step progress and the very specific psychological levers used in this daily schedule. Every single action, from drinking a glass of water to how you manage confusion, it's all intentional.
Nothing is wasted.
So let's start at the beginning of the cycle.
Mm.
So we begin with establishing the day's foundation, intentional mornings and positive mindset. The source starts with this incredibly deliberate opening sequence. We're calling it the waking ritual.
And that initial auditory cue is just crucial. It says, hello, welcome back. This is your English practice time. Take a deep breath, relax your mind. Let us begin.
It's so formal. It's not casual at all.
No, and that's the point. It's an immediate structured transition. It's signaling to your limbic system to shift out of that, reactive, often chaotic state of waking up and into a dedicated, focused flow state.
So it's like a trigger.
It is Pavlovian conditioning, but applied to learning. The soundscape itself becomes the trigger for cognitive engagement.
And then the script moves immediately into these sensory details. I wake up early in the morning. I look at the window and see the sunlight. I feel fresh and calm. It seems almost meditative. Why is that focus on specific sensory input so vital for starting a learning session?
Well, it's rooted in chronobiology, right?
Mhm.
Waking up early and actively seeking out sunlight exposure, that helps regulate your circadian rhythm.
Right, the body clock.
Exactly. And that, in turn, optimizes your cortisol and melatonin levels. By making the learner proactive about light exposure, they are physically telling their brain that the rest phase is over. It enhances alertness. Feeling fresh and calm isn't just a passive result of waking up.
It's an active goal.
It's an active cognitive goal. Think about it. If you start your day in a mad scramble, your prefrontal cortex is already overloaded just managing stress and urgency. It's stealing all that essential working memory capacity that you desperately need for something like language acquisition.
You're lowering the cognitive load right from the get-go. You're clearing the runway before the knowledge plane even tries to land.
Sure.
But I have to ask, this routine gets so specific about physical actions. The source says, I brush my teeth and wash my face. I drink a glass of warm water.
Yeah.
Why does a deep dive like this need to focus on what seems like, well, mundane hygiene?
But that mundanity is the brilliance of it. It's the mechanism. We are looking at the mechanism of habit formation here, specifically the work of behavioral scientists like B.J. Fogg. These are what he calls tiny habits. or momentum builders.
Okay.
Brushing your teeth is a deeply ingrained, super low effort habit. By stacking the learning preparation like drinking the water, sitting at the desk immediately after a successful pre-existing habit like brushing, you dramatically lower the activation energy required to start the new, much harder task.
So the physical routine is serving as this reliable, non-negotiable anchor. When you drink that warm water, you aren't even thinking about grammar rules yet.
Not at all.
You're just executing the starting sequence.
Exactly. And the warm water specifically, it has a dual function. It moves beyond just hygiene. In terms of something called embodied cognition, the physical act of nurturing your body, hydration, temperature regulation, it creates an internal sense of order and safety. The brain registers, okay, I am cared for, I am prepared, which further minimizes that internal resistance to challenging intellectual work.
So the physical success of completing these tiny predetermined steps, it generates a feeling of competence.
Yes.
And that feeling then carries over into tackling the bigger, more complex task of learning. It's breeding success at a molecular level.
Precisely. And this leads directly to the core operational principle that's articulated in the source. I believe mornings decide the mood of the day. And this isn't just about feeling good. It's a strategy for professional discipline.
Okay, but let me push back on that a little bit. Doesn't this kind of hyper-structured, high-stakes morning routine risk making the learner feel more stressed if they fail? If they don't meet this rigid timeline. How does the script account for the inevitable disruptions of real life? A sick kid, a last-minute email from the boss.
That is a critical challenge. It's a great question. And the answer really lies in understanding the difference between discipline and perfectionism. If the learner waits for motivation to strike or waits for the perfect, uninterrupted morning, they will never, ever be consistent. By defining the morning as a proactive mood setter, the routine institutionalizes discipline, which is the choice to act regardless of how you feel.
So even if you miss a step, you don't throw the whole day away.
Exactly. If they miss the sunlight, they still do the water and the dusk sequence. The structure is flexible enough to handle, say, the 80% rule. You focus on executing the core 80% of the routine consistently, and that occasional disruption won't derail the entire system.
That proactive approach inoculates the learner against the emotional fallout of a disruption. You manage your state first, then you manage the information. Now, the source transitions beautifully from this physical ritual to the mental framework needed for sustained practice. They call it simple thoughts.
And this section is the critical psychological safety valve for the whole system. It's all about embracing progress over perfection. The source immediately acknowledges the reality of any sustained effort. Some days are good, some days are difficult.
And I think we overlook the immense importance of just normalizing difficulty in the learning process. We so often see competence portrayed as this seamless, effortless flow, but the reality is messy. It's almost always messy.
Absolutely. If every difficult day leads to self-criticism or guilt, that psychological friction, it eventually leads to avoidance and then quitting. Guilt is absolutely toxic to consistency. By preemptively stating that difficulty is normal, the routine prevents the learner from equating a low-output practice day with a personal failure.
It moves the focus away from emotional judgment and brings it back to diagnostic data gathering, which is essential for the learner. And the central mantra reinforces this. But every day teaches something.
That is the ultimate reframe. It links directly to Carol Dweck's whole concept of the growth mindset. The difficult days are not wasted days. They are essential diagnostic opportunities.
How so?
Well, if you struggle to retain a specific grammatical structure, for example, that difficult day is telling you precisely where your current learning strategy is failing. It's revealing the gaps in your understanding. So every day yields data, and the data is always useful.
So whether the day is easy or hard, you've secured a cognitive win. You've learned something about your process. That data-focused mindset leads directly to focusing on the micro-win. Even small progress is still progress. This is where we really need to delve into the mechanism of motivation. How does defining small progress protect the learner from burnout or feeling totally overwhelmed by the sheer volume of material?
It's a huge problem. When a subject is vast, like mastering a language or achieving technical fluency in coding, the learner looks up and sees the summit, and the scale of it is just paralyzing. This is often the point where information overload triggers avoidance. Defining small progress provides a manageable, immediate goal that is psychologically rewarding.
So give us some examples. What does small progress actually look like in this context?
It has to be low friction and observable. It might be simply showing up to the desk, that's a win, Or successfully executing 5 minutes of focused work without checking your phone, another win. Or accurately defining and using just one new vocabulary word. The key is that the success bar is deliberately set low enough to be cleared 95% of the time.
It's the neurological reward system at work, isn't it? That's what you're tapping into.
Entirely. When you achieve that small goal, the brain releases a microdose of dopamine, the chemical associated with anticipation and reward. This immediate positive reinforcement loop links the effort of showing up with the feeling of success. If the bar for success is always massive, like only perfect output counts, the learner will inevitably burn out because the reward mechanism is too delayed and way too infrequent.
Right.
This routine ensures a daily, sustainable dose of validation, protecting the learner from that debilitating effect of information overload. The daily dose of small progress is the motivational fuel for the next 24 hours.
Okay, so with the mind anchored and the psychological contract established that progress, not perfection, is the goal, we shift into section 2, structured effort, planning, focus, and managing confusion. This is where that proactive energy has to be turned into focused output.
Yes, and the transition from the morning ritual to the study ritual is, again, marked by physical specificity. It creates a very clear demarcation between lifetime and deep work time. The source says, I sit at my desk, I open my notebook.
Which is interesting because we live in an age where most learning happens on a laptop, often with dozens of distractions just a single click away. Why is the source place such an emphasis on the physical preparation, the dedicated desk, the analog notebook?
There are 2 critical reasons for that. First is something called context-dependent memory. When you dedicate a specific space, the desk, and specific tools, the physical notebook, exclusively to learning, your brain creates a powerful contextual cue. Just sitting down immediately signals the brain to retrieve and process learning-related information. It removes the energy required to mentally switch gears.
And the analog element, the notebook, I'm assuming that's about managing the digital chaos.
Precisely. It's a very effective defense against attention residue.
Attention residue, what exactly is that?
Attention residue, it's a concept explored in a lot of deep work research. It basically states that when you switch tasks, a piece of your focus remains stuck on the previous task. You know, that last email you read, that text message that just popped up.
Right, you're not fully present in the new task.
You're not.
So by using an analog notebook for focused study, you physically isolate the learning task from the endless stimuli that are just inherent in a digital device. And you minimize the cognitive cost of task switching and achieve, true deep focus.
It makes perfect sense. You've used the morning routine to control the environment inside your head. Now you're using the desk setup to control the environment around you.
Yes. And within that controlled environment, the strategy of execution begins with intentional pacing. I plan my tasks slowly. This runs completely counter to the modern impulse to just rush into execution.
Oh, I know I'm guilty of this. I try to rush my planning, usually while checking 3 different Slack channels. Why is that slow planning concept so critical and so counterintuitive to how we operate today?
Because rushing your planning is often just an exercise in avoidance. You're avoiding the necessary cognitive friction required to truly understand the task ahead of you. Slow planning is a form of pre-mortem analysis.
A pre-mortem.
Yeah, it forces the learner to mentally categorize the material, to estimate the required cognitive effort, and to prioritize the sequential actions. It moves you from a state of general anxiety about the subject to specific, manageable steps.
So the 5 minutes you spend planning slowly might save you an hour of inefficient, wasteful effort later on. You're building sturdy mental pathways before you start running on them.
It's the classic distinction between efficiency, which is doing the thing quickly, and effectiveness, which is doing the right thing correctly. Slow planning ensures effectiveness, and this effectiveness is maximized by the core concentration technique that's mentioned next. I focus on one thing at a time.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me. Discussing single tasking as a critical tool for the learner in an era of constant information overload. We are conditioned to believe that multitasking is a badge of modern productivity.
That belief is, it's a fantasy. It's rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of how the brain works. Multitasking is actually rapid, highly inefficient task switching, and that switching incurs a severe cognitive cost. There are studies that show that even a brief interruption can take up to 25 minutes to fully recover from.
25 minutes. That is massive latency built into the learning process.
It is. So when the goal is quick but thorough knowledge acquisition, deep focus is absolutely non-negotiable. By dedicating full attention to one thing at a time, one specific vocabulary set, one grammatical concept, or one complex technical procedure, the learner maximizes their encoding potential. They are not merely reading, they are activating the pathways necessary for that information to consolidate into long-term memory.
This sounds like a justification for techniques like the Pomodoro technique, right? Where you dedicate a specific focused chunk of time to only one input.
It is, very much so. The source material is essentially prescribing a commitment to what some call the 90-20 cognitive cycle. The brain is really optimized for deep focus in cycles of about 60 to 90 minutes.
And after that.
After that, trying to sustain that focus for hours without a break, it just leads to diminishing returns, frustration, and eventual confusion. By setting the rule of singular focus, the routine guarantees that the limited time you've allocated to learning is used at maximum capacity.
And the script perfectly anticipates the consequence of that deep focus, which is inevitable cognitive friction. It addresses handling cognitive friction by accepting confusion not as a flaw, but as a normal signal from your brain.
The trigger is stated so clearly. When I feel confused, this is the moment where so many learners, especially those driven by perfectionism, either abandon the task or spiral into self-doubt. The source just normalizes this feeling. It's not a signal to quit, it's a signal to execute the protocol.
And the prescribed response is so simple, but powerful and strategic. I take a short break and start again. This is the strategic pause. But we need to know what's happening in the brain during that pause. Why is this more effective than just trying to push through the confusion?
Well, when confusion strikes, your brain has usually hit a wall of processing capacity. The short break isn't procrastination. It is an active self-regulation strategy that engages what's called the default mode network, or DMN.
The DMN, that's the part of the brain that fires up when we let our minds wander, right? When we're daydreaming.
Exactly. When you step away from the desk, get a glass of water, or simply stare out the window for a minute, the DMN begins to process and consolidate the very information you were just struggling with. It's organizing the data peripherally, linking the new, confusing concepts to your existing knowledge structures, all without the pressure of active retrieval.
So you're learning even when you're not trying to learn.
In a way, yes. You return to the task not just refreshed, but with the benefit of subconscious consolidation. And this often results in a spontaneous insight or a breakthrough. You suddenly just get it.
So the break is a required part of the learning cycle, not a failure of will. It ensures thoroughness, satisfying that need for quick but thorough knowledge acquisition, even if it feels counterintuitive to stop.
The implication is massive. The pace might feel slower in the moment because you are pausing every 90 minutes or whenever confusion hits, but the total time to mastery is dramatically reduced because the knowledge foundation you're building is solid. The routine eliminates the need for endless rereading and prevents the learner from building poor understanding on a shaky base.
Okay, so we've established the morning mindset and the focused work blocks. Now we have to address what is often the greatest emotional obstacle in any skill acquisition. Section 3. The psychology of speaking. Overcoming shyness and valuing mistakes. This gets right to the fear of public performance.
Yes, and this section tackles the barrier of shyness immediately. It acknowledges the vulnerability right up front. Sometimes I feel shy while speaking English. I worry about mistakes. This is the high-stakes moment for any learner. It doesn't matter if it's giving a presentation, deploying code for the first time, or speaking a new language. The fear is rooted in external judgment.
And the technical competence is often miles ahead of the performance confidence, isn't it? You know the material inside and out, but the moment you have to produce it live, that fear triggers a kind of cognitive shutdown.
That vulnerability stems from a performance mindset where your primary goal is external validation or, more often, avoiding criticism. When the emotional stakes are that high, the brain prioritizes the fear response over complex cognitive functions like language recall.
So how does the routine get around that?
The routine uses a psychological trick to override this fear. It mandates a transformative shift with the line, but then I remember something important.
And what's so fascinating here is the core philosophical pillar that really supports the entire practice, the reframing of errors. The source states it so clearly: mistakes help me learn.
This is the critical transition from judging a performance to analyzing data. In a learning mindset, mistakes are not failures that damage your self-esteem. They are high-value data points. A mistake provides an immediate, highly specific feedback loop. When you mispronounce a word or misuse a grammatical tense, the brain registers that discrepancy very strongly because of the associated social anxiety.
Wait, so that anxiety, which felt like a blocker, actually becomes an amplifier for memory encoding if you channel it correctly.
Precisely. If you can view a mistake as objective information, okay, I used the wrong verb tense there, therefore my practice needs to focus more on conjugation, you instantly remove the negative emotional charge. It stops being a judgment on your competence and becomes a guidepost for your next steps. This accelerates the feedback loop that's necessary for rapid skill acquisition.
So the routine is actively training the brain, not to fear the error, but to seek the necessary insight that is contained within the error. This must be incredibly liberating for the learner who struggles with perfectionism, which is such a common trait among people who seek mastery.
Oh, perfectionism is a paralyzing force. It causes learners to hoard knowledge, reading more, listening more, but refusing to ever produce anything for fear of making an error. By normalizing and actually utilizing mistakes, this daily rhythm gives you permission for low-stakes failure, which is the fastest route to high-level competence.
Right.
You practice, you make an error, you analyze the error, you correct it, and you move on, all within the structured, emotionally safe zone of your daily routine. This is the engine of improvement in action.
The simple mechanism is stated as, practice makes me better.
Uh-huh.
We discussed earlier that this is a reliance on consistency over raw talent. But let's get into the weeds a bit on the actual neurological impact of this kind of consistent daily repetition. What's happening in the brain?
We're talking about neuroplasticity, specifically the role of myelin. Every time you practice a skill, a difficult sentence structure, a complex technical procedure, the neural pathways carrying that information are activated. The more consistently you activate that specific pathway, the more your brain wraps it in a fatty sheath called myelin.
And myelin acts like the insulation on a wire, right? It just speeds up the signal.
Exactly. Myelin enables faster, more efficient, and more reliable transmission of information along that nerve. Consistent daily repetition, even with small errors that are immediately corrected, builds a thick, robust layer of myelin around the essential pathways.
So in the context of language, what does that feel like?
This consistency takes the effortful, slow process of consciously translating in your head and makes it automatic, fluent, and subconscious. The utility of the daily routine is that it ensures continuous myelination, which makes mastery less about innate talent and more about sustained intentional output.
So let me get this straight. If you practice once a week for, say, 3 hours, you might not generate the same level of myelination as if you practice daily for just 30 focused minutes.
That's correct. The brain responds much better to frequent, short bursts of focused effort than it does to infrequent, lengthy fatigue sessions. The daily rhythm is an optimization strategy for neuroplastic change.
And this directly impacts confidence, which is the final output of this segment. How does consistently practicing, even with mistakes, build the necessary trust in oneself that's mentioned later in the script?
Confidence is not a feeling you wait for. It is generated through irrefutable evidence. Every single day that you execute the routine, you wake up, you sit down, you focus, you generate output, you are successfully completing the fundamental task of self-regulation and engagement.
So even if the output has mistakes, the execution of the process itself is a success.
It is. This accumulated procedural evidence, this constant repetition, builds deep self-trust. It's often called procedural memory.
So you learn to trust the system you've built for yourself, and because you built the system, you start to trust yourself to handle the complexity of the skill.
That's the core realization. Confidence is not the belief that you will never fail. It's the belief that when you fail, your process, your daily routine, will successfully guide you back to correction and improvement. Confidence is generated through repetition, not pre-existing ability. You don't wait until you're good to be confident. You leverage the confidence gained from consistency to become good.
Okay, we've tracked the learner through the morning setup and the focus work period. This brings us to section 4, validation, reflection, and long-term trajectory. If the early part of the day was all about investment, this final part is about retrieval and consolidation.
Yes, and the source mandates an explicit focus on immediate application and success, which we're calling the power of little victories. The process of active learning that's outlined is highly specific. Today, I learned a new word. I used it in a sentence.
This is the core application segment, and it's such a powerful technique for memory consolidation. It moves knowledge from passive reception, just hearing or reading the word, to active production, actually using the word in a novel context you create yourself.
This transition is absolutely essential. Researchers call this the testing effect or retrieval practice. It's a scientifically proven method that dramatically strengthens your memory traces. Passive consumption, like rereading your notes, it tricks your brain into thinking the information is known. It leads to something called the fluency illusion.
You feel like you know it, but you can't actually use it.
Exactly. Active retrieval, like forcing yourself to use the word in an unscripted sentence, forces the brain to truly access and reconstruct the memory, and that's what makes it stick.
And the routine isn't just asking the learner to recall the word. It's asking them to apply it under a tiny bit of pressure, in the form of a short conversation or even just self-talk.
Yes. And the low-friction nature of the task is key. You don't need to write a 10-page report on the word, you just need one sentence. This maximizes the retention benefit while minimizing the energy required for the application phase.
And the immediate emotional reward is built right in. I felt happy. Little victories matter. This emotional reinforcement loop learning, applying, feeling happy, is clearly essential for sustaining motivation and sticking with the routine.
This is the neurological payoff that sustains the entire habit loop. When the learner actively applies the new word and succeeds, even in a small way, the brain delivers a little surge of dopamine and serotonin. This positive feeling becomes indelibly linked to the effort of learning.
It's strategic, immediate gratification. You're teaching your brain that effort leads directly to pleasure, which ensures you keep adhering to the daily routine long after that initial motivation inevitably wears off.
Exactly. If learning only resulted in frustration and really delayed rewards, the routine would collapse within weeks. But by explicitly identifying and celebrating a little victory, using a new vocabulary word, or correctly applying a recently learned formula, you are training your brain to seek out and repeat that beneficial behavior.
After the active learning and application, the routine then mandates a crucial cool-down phase. Evening reflection, the source says. In the evening, I slow down. I think about my day. Why is this slowing down and reflection period so crucial for cementing the lessons you've learned?
Well, during the day, the learner is focused on accumulation and execution. The evening is reserved for consolidation and meaning-making. It's a crucial metacognitive process. When you slow down and just think about your day, you engage the mechanism of memory replay.
Memory replay, what does that entail exactly?
During quiet rest periods, and especially in the phase just before sleep, the hippocampus rapidly replays the neural patterns that were established during your active learning sessions. This process strengthens the connections between neurons, and it effectively cements those short-term memories into long-term storage. If you skip reflection, if you just go from learning straight to distraction, you miss this crucial automatic consolidation phase. The routine forces intentional quiet time to allow your subconscious mind to do its heavy lifting.
It prevents the learning process from becoming just a mindless checklist. You stop, you assess, and you connect the disparate pieces of information from the day.
And this reflection leads naturally into the final phase, which is self-assessment and self-compassion. I appreciate my effort. I may not be perfect, but I am improving. This returns us to the psychological resilience we established way back in the morning.
The loop closes. The value is placed squarely on effort and trajectory, not on instantaneous perfection.
By appreciating the effort itself, the learner reinforces that positive habit loop. They conclude the day with self-compassion, not self-criticism. This ensures that the cumulative weight of daily learning doesn't lead to burnout or self-judgment. The focus must always be on the forward vector, improving.
That's incredibly powerful. You've given yourself permission to be human while still demanding commitment from yourself.
Which culminates in the final motivation and affirmation. The key takeaways from the whole day are reinforced. I am learning English step by step. I speak with confidence. I trust myself. These three pillars, structure, confidence, and self-trust, are the ultimate goal of the entire daily routine, synthesized from the day's activities.
So the routine provides the structure. The daily small successes within that routine build the confidence. And the consistency of the entire process reinforces the self-trust. It's a perfectly calibrated system.
And the cycle is designed to be continuous. It encourages the listener to return to that foundational rhythm. Tomorrow will be better. Keep going. It's a gentle yet firm closing that acknowledges the long journey ahead while celebrating the simple commitment to just show up again tomorrow. The architecture of a single day becomes the foundation for lifelong learning.
This has been a truly comprehensive deep dive. We started with what looked like a simple instructional script for language learning, and we've extracted what is essentially a universal blueprint for mastery in any complex field. We've seen that success relies not just on consuming content, but on structure, on intentional physical routines, psychological resilience, and validation through those crucial little victories.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this source provides a profoundly valuable blueprint for any learner out there who's seeking to manage information overload and that feeling of being overwhelmed. It shows that the path to thoroughness and speed is not achieved by frantically cramming more hours into the day.
Right.
It's achieved by strictly prioritizing intentionality, singular focus, and self-compassion within a strict, protective daily framework. The consistency of the structure absorbs the turbulence of the difficult material.
It's proof that the most effective learning system is often the one that focuses intensely on managing the human being who is actually doing the learning, managing their anxiety, their focus, and their internal reward system before focusing purely on the content itself.
And that leads to a final provocative thought for you to consider. The source material uses the structure of a single day to teach confidence and progress. So think about a time in your life when you experienced a major breakthrough, a sudden mastery of a complex topic, a successful presentation that went perfectly, or that aha moment where everything just clicked into place.
When you look back at that breakthrough moment, how much of that sudden success was actually the silent, unacknowledged culmination of small, tactical, neurological victories? The glass of water, the dedicated desk, the single tasking, the reframed mistake that you executed consistently day after day before the visible success ever materialized.
The breakthrough is not one giant leap. It's a million small, invisible steps that suddenly look like a jump because they were all executed consistently within a reliable daily rhythm. Keep going.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you incorporate these intentional rhythms into your own pursuit of mastery, whatever field you're exploring next.